Hey everyone! So in this video I'm going to be taking a look at a mini PC, which is a first for this channel. I've noticed though that over the past few years these seem to have grown in popularity because they're compact and affordable, and the one which I've decided to take a look at is the Minisforum MSA1, and the reason this one caught my eye is that it's powered by a Ryzen 7 8700G, which is a desktop APU using the AM5 socket, and that's a bit unique for a mini PC, where you'd normally expect to see an integrated mobile chip. But first, this video was brought to you by VIP SCD Key. If you head over there using my link in the description box below, you'll find they offer cheap OEM Windows 10 keys, for which you can use my discount code TPC, which gives you 25% off, bringing the price down to $17 US. And once activated, you'll be able to upgrade to Windows 11 for free. They also offer Office 2019, which you'll be able to get for only $60 US using the code TPC. So back to the video. So the MSA1 is being sold as a mini workstation, and I think that comes across in the design aesthetic. Apart from the USB ports and the power LED, it's entirely black, with ventilation all over and very minimal branding, which does give it a very minimalistic look. Like, it wouldn't look out of place in an office setting. In fact, I think they disappear into the background, which I think is entirely the point. Compared to other mini PCs on the market, it is a bit on the larger side, but not enough that it would leave the mini PC category in my opinion. There's no rubber pads on the sides, so I don't think it's designed to be used vertically, although you could remove the rubber feet from the bottom and add some to the side if you were that way inclined. With it not being very wide though, I think it would be prone to tipping over if the connected cables were pulled. But quickly going through the I/O, at the front we've got the power button, a headphone microphone combo jack, a USB 2.0 port and two USB 3.2 Gen 1 ports. At the back there's another USB 2.0 port, a USB 3.2 port, but this one is Gen 2, and then the PC's only USB Type-C port. And this Type-C port is USB 4, supporting speeds of up to 40 gigabits per second and can be used for display output. Although, if you install a Ryzen 7000 or 9000 series CPU, it will drop down to being a 10 gigabits per second USB 3.2 port. There's also a HDMI 2.1 port and a DisplayPort 2.0. This is an Oculink port, which can be used for connecting external GPUs, and Minisforum sells an external GPU dock, which I'm hoping will arrive in time for this video, as that would be really interesting to play with. And lastly, there's two Realtek 2.5 gigabit ports supporting link aggregation. And I could see some people finding a use for this as part of their network for server and remotely accessed tasks. And it does look at home on a 2U networking shelf. With that said, the slightly larger Intel-powered MS01 might be a better pick for that sort of application because it features two 10 gigabits per second SFP Plus ports and a half-height PCIe expansion slot. To power the unit, there's this laptop-style external brick, which is larger than I was expecting. Whilst it's a common practice to use external power bricks like this, I always find it to be a cheat when it comes to systems that boast about how small they are. I would personally prefer it was internal, even if the system is therefore larger. So the MSA1 is sold in two ways. Either bare bones, which comes without a CPU, memory, SSD or operating system, or as a complete system, which includes the 8700G, 32GB of DDR5 memory, and a 1TB SSD with Windows 11 preloaded. And at the time of recording this, it would be a little cheaper to go with the bare bones route, as you can then pick out the best deals available for each individual component. But they're certainly not overcharging for the fully pre-built system given the added convenience. Opening the system is very easy. It's just two screws and then you use this little tool to slide the internals out, giving you easy access to both sides. So on the underside we've got the first two of four M.2 slots. Yep, this little system has 4 M.2 drive slots, which is more than many full-size desktops. And they're all 2280, which is the most common size, allowing you to get the best value for money when shopping for storage. But I have to say that Minisforum needs to do a better job of informing you of the speed of these M.2 slots. There's confusing or conflicting information depending on whether you're looking at the banner, the specs, or the manual. But this is the actual chart you need, which is too well hidden on the UK store, but is more clearly posted on the US store. The Japanese page has the most useful chart though, as it gives you a full list of compatible CPUs and their respective M.2 and USB-C speed information. But anyway, with the 8700G, these two slots on the underside of the board are PCIe 4.0 running at X4 speed, and their second slot can be converted into a U.2 slot using the included adapter, which could come in handy for people with enterprise drives. With an M.2 drive though, keep in mind that larger heatsinks will run into clearance issues. So we have this cooling fan, which cools the primary SSD through this interestingly shaped heatsink, and hopefully keeps air moving under the system in general. But the included SSD is made by Kingston, and I've put the Crystal Disk benchmark results on the screen for you. And this is an Intel XA210 card, which provides Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.3 connectivity. So flipping the system over, we find a large heatsink, which covers the memory slots, and two more M.2 drive slots. One of them is a PCIe 3.0 slot running at X4, which makes this the perfect place to install an older drive if you're bringing one over from an older system. And the last slot is PCIe 4.0, but running at only X1, which will be a bottleneck to most PCIe 4.0 drives. If I was buying an SSD for this slot, I think I'd pick a cheaper Gen 4 drive, probably one of the ones that use cheaper QLC flash. But this means that all filled, you could put four 8TB M.2 SSDs in the MSA1 and have 32TB of solid state storage, which would be amazing. So after fighting for a bit with the tape that they've used, I was able to access a stick of memory and see that they've used a 2x16GB kit of crucial DDR5 5600 CL46 memory, and this acts as both system memory and video memory. And DDR5 5600 is the fastest officially supported by the CPU. But you could pick up a CL40 kit for a little more money than these crucial modules cost. So removing the CPU cooler can be done by unscrewing 4 screws on the underside and then one within the heatsink. And then after unplugging the fans, I can then lift the entire cooling assembly out like the professional that I am. The cooler uses an impressive heat pipe arrangement, which leads to a heatsink that runs across the entire back of the system, which is cooled by 2 blower style fans. And here we see the Ryzen 7 8700G APU. I wouldn't have guessed that the first AM5 CPU on the channel would be an APU, but I have always loved the concept of AMD's APUs. And the 8700G is AMD's most powerful one yet. So the MSA1 has a straightforward BIOS, which includes a setting for allocating the amount of memory dedicated to the GPU with the 8700G. By default, this is 2GB, with around 15GB being shared between system memory or video memory, depending on where it's needed at the time. There's also a gaming optimized preset, which changes this to 4GB. I decided, based on my experience of handheld gaming, where some games don't get on well with dynamic memory allocation, to change this to 8GB, which still leaves up to 24GB for system memory, which should be plenty for what I do with the MSA1. Temps are kept under control by the cooling solution, and in terms of noise, I wouldn't say the PC is loud, but it's not exactly quiet either. It's as audible as you'd expect a system like this to be, which is to say it's similar to a high-performance laptop. I would like to have the ability to control the fans though, as it would be nice to customise the fan curves to be a little less aggressive. Power consumption at idle is around 14 watts, and when under a full stress test load it's around 96 watts, so this is a very power efficient system. So moving on to the testing, the first test that I ran was PC Mark, as this tests a range of general purpose computing tasks. This felt like the sort of test I need to be running, since a mini PC like this could be deployed in an office environment, but it did all feel a bit silly given that the AMD 8700G is a modern 8-core Ryzen processor. Its Zen 4 has 8 cores and a max boost clock of 5.1 GHz, so obviously it's going to have no performance issues here, and in fact I'd say it's entirely overkill for general computing on its own. Next, I ran Cinebench 2024, and the MSA1 scored 990 in the multi-core test, and 107 in the single-core test. And just out of curiosity, I also ran Cinebench on my game PC, which has a 5900X, and on my workstation, which has a 12900K. The MSA1's single-core score is impressive, and it shows why it's probably time for me to be upgrading my gaming PC. The multi-core score is good too, it's just against CPUs that have a lot more cores here. I also ran Blender, Handbrake and 7-Zip, and you can see those results here. I tried some 4K video editing with Adobe Premiere Pro, and tracking through the timeline is snappy and responsive enough. I'd have no problem switching to this as my workstation for doing the type of editing that I do for these YouTube uploads. And rendering my last upload on the MSA1 took 56 minutes. For comparison, my workstation Lotus did it in 32 minutes, but that system does cost around 3 times as much, so I think the MSA1 is very impressive given its price point and size. So moving on to some gaming performance, I started with Forza Horizon 5. This game suggested that I run it in 1080p on the low settings preset, and this had my average frame rate in the 80s using the built-in benchmark. However, I was able to increase this to the high preset, which still kept the average frame rate above 60. Next was Horizon Zero Dawn, and this is the original, not the remaster, which isn't out until the end of the month. I'm running a little bit of FSR upscaling here, which is set to quality, and the graphics preset is set to original, which is medium settings. And this gives me an average of 66 FPS in the built-in benchmark. So I've been making my way through the Resident Evil games, and recently completed Village. I have this set to the prioritised graphics preset, and I think the game runs and looks great like this, even if it is below 60 FPS. I should warn everyone though that I might be a bit biased to how it looks here, because I've made the mistake of choosing this PC review to be my first experience of PC gaming on an OLED display. And oh my god, it's a game changer. I want every display I ever use from now on to be an OLED. Keeping with the whole mini theme, I decided to use a portable monitor for testing, and this is an F13NA from Intihill. It's a 1080p OLED, and it is just blowing me away. But anyway, Resident Evil Village looks great on the MSA1. So I don't really play competitive shooters, but I do run the benchmark for Rainbow Six Extraction. This game's presets include dynamic resolution scaling, but I prefer to know the settings the game is running in, so I changed this to native 1080p. And this gives me an average of around 60 FPS with high settings. Next, I tried Star Wars Outlaws, and this is a game that I've actually found challenging to get running consistently smoothly, even when playing it on a PC that's using an RTX 4090. So with this, I'm using the low preset and as much upscaling as I can, and the result is running roughly around and just below 30 FPS. Granted, moving around in the open world on a speeder is probably the most difficult part of the game to run, so you would get more performance in more enclosed spaces, but I'd say that Star Wars Outlaws is potentially a step too far for this little system. Turning on frame gen does help with motion smoothness, but it adds some visual artifacts. But it is an option. So with Shadow of the Tomb Raider, you can average 60 FPS if you go for 1080p low settings with a little bit of upscaling. You could lower the settings even more because there is a preset below low, or increase the upscaling and the frame rate would go up. Or you could do the opposite and have much better visuals if you're willing to enter the console gaming territory of a 30 FPS target. With Cyberpunk 2077, I kept things simple by opting for the Steam Deck preset. The 8700G is a lot more powerful than the Steam Deck, but I am trying to output to a 1080p display, whereas the Steam Deck only has a resolution of 800p. But this resulted in an average frame rate of 45 FPS. And then lastly, a game which ran surprisingly well, Spider-Man Miles Morales. This is high settings and FSR free set to balanced. And you can see as I'm travelling around the city that the frame rate is fairly decent for a game which can be quite demanding. If I was actually going to play the game on this system, I think I'd use dynamic resolution scaling with a target of 60 FPS, turn on VSync so that there's no screen tearing, and then add in FSR free frame gen to fill in any sub 60 FPS gaps. And during my short playtest, this resulted in smooth and consistent gameplay. So the 8700G actually reminds me a lot of the Z1 Extreme inside my ROG Ally handheld gaming PC, which should actually come as no surprise because it's essentially a different variant of the same APU. The MSA1 has a lot more power available to the APU than the ROG Ally does, 65 watts compared to 30, which leads it to beating the ROG Ally in the few comparative tests that I ran, but not by as much as I expected, mostly because the ROG Ally has faster shared memory. The comparison to the ROG Ally is an interesting one because the Ally is a purpose-built gaming product, whereas the MSA1 is a very different thing. There's barely a mention of gaming on the Minis forum product page, but obviously I was always going to focus on gaming because that's where my interests lie, and overall I think the MSA1 will play the majority of games, especially in 1080p. Less demanding indie titles and older games will also run great, and then there's emulation, which is a category that I haven't even touched on in this video, but one that this system would be an absolute powerhouse at. Playing the latest games like Star Wars Outlaws is going to be a challenge though, and that's where you'd really benefit from a system with a discrete GPU to get the most out of those titles. But the MSA1 does have that Oculink port for being able to do just that. And speaking of which, the DG1 Oculink external GPU dock has arrived. But I'm thinking that rather than just doing a couple of initial tests in this video, that it would be better to make that a separate upload so that I can do a proper deep dive. So what are my thoughts on the Minis Forum MSA1 Workstation Mini PC? Well, I think that if this is what mini PCs have to offer, then it's understandable why they're becoming so popular. Out of curiosity, I looked into what my local big electronics retailer is offering in terms of traditional small tower PCs, and they make the MSA1 look like an absolute bargain. Although I think that says more about the poor value on offer by the retailer and big name brands. The MSA1 is the sort of product that could be used for so many things. I could see it being used for home lab networking stuff, I could see it being used as a media centre, for general computing and productivity, and light to moderate gaming and emulation. It's the type of system that nerdy people will see and a light bulb will just go off and they'll know like exactly what this would be perfect for, and it would be an entirely different answer to the next person's. It's a very versatile system, especially because of the affordable bare bones option that you can then configure to your needs. I love that it has an AM5 socket because that gives you more options for upgrading and moving around CPUs in the future. With all that said, at £700 pre-built, which I do think is an entirely reasonable price, it won't be the best choice for everyone. For example, if size isn't as much of a factor for you and you just wanted the best gaming PC you can buy for the money, then this won't be it. But it's cool, it's small, and there's a lot of people who will love it. So if you like this video, please hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already and you want to see more of my videos. Thank you so much to my incredible patrons. And thank you all for watching. Goodbye.